to ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the potential impact on Scottish Government's standard due diligence of reports of lost documentation related to the Ferguson Marine ferry contract.
Minister Ivan McKee.
We have been absolutely transparent about the decision-making process and the information which informed those decisions. There is a clear audit trail of key decisions and the basis on which they were taken. In relation to the documents mentioned in the Audit Scotland report, a thorough search has been conducted and no ministerial response to the submission of 8 October 2015 has been located. As outlined in the Audit Scotland report, we have committed to a formal review following the completion of the vessels project.
Daniel Johnson.
I don't quite know how to respond to that answer, Deputy Presiding Officer, because on Thursday the Auditor-General expressed frustration at the lack of records of ministerial decisions regarding the waiving of refund guarantees that would normally be expected in such a contract as that for the ferries. Written authority from ministers should be required for this, yet no record could be obtained by Audit Scotland. The Auditor-General describes this as frustrating. He is being charitable. It is at best negligent and incompetent. At worst, it could be unlawful, breaching the Finance and Public Administration Act and/or the Freedom of Information Act. So will the Minister commission an investigation into this matter to establish the facts and, critically, whether or not the law has been broken?
Minister.
The Scottish Government, Transport Scotland, along with CMAL and Ferguson Marine, Port Glasgow, have all cooperated fully with Audit Scotland and the Rural Economy and Connectivity Committee inquiries. And this included provision of documentation, provision of a detailed written statement, as well as interviews with key personnel and attendance at REC by both officials and Scottish ministers. And we have also committed to undertake a review, as I said earlier, on completion of the two vessels.
Daniel Johnson.
The problem is, for transparency, the documents need to be there, and they are not, and the law requires it. And sadly, this is not an isolated incident, neither in the context of the sorry saga of the two ferries, nor on other Scottish Government interventions. It follows a pattern of opaque decision-making and roughshod process that can be seen elsewhere, such as the environmental indemnities for Liberty Steel found to have breached state aid laws, the Loch Arbor smelter, where hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money were put at risk through secret guarantees, a decision that only emerged after a two-year battle over FOIs with the Scottish Government by journalists, requests that the Scottish Government knew would be overturned on appeal. With the ferries, we saw them launched in time for the SNP conference, fake windows and all, before they were ready and on a timetable that cost taxpayers more. The pattern is of due process that is deficient, lacking transparency and deliberately distorted to suit political ends rather than public interest. So you could call this many things: negligent, incompetent, deficient. But when these decisions have all been willful and deliberate, the word I would use is corrupt. Perhaps not for individual gain, but a corruption of the process for party political gains contrary to the public interest. So if that's not the word the Minister would use, what word would he use?
Minister.
As I've already indicated, a thorough search was taken for those documents and no ministerial response to that submission has been located. As I've already indicated, we've outlined in the Audit Scotland report we have committed to a formal review following completions of the vessels project. But what is important to recognise, and Daniel Johnson and other members in the Chamber failed to recognise, is that Ferguson, 7 years after those events, is still employing hundreds and hundreds of people, is still employing skilled people, is still contributing to the local economy, and is still keeping. If the members, but I know the members don't think that Scotland's industrial base is important, but if they maybe want to be quiet for a minute and listen to this answer, because this is important. This is important to the people of Scotland, the people of Inverclyde, that yard is still employing hundreds of people and is keeping commercial shipbuilding on the Clyde alive. As in Loch Arbor, where the site there is employing increasing numbers of people and being successful in what it's delivering the products into the Scottish and further afield markets. That's what's important, supporting Scottish industry. This Government makes no apology for being committed to supporting Scottish industry and for making sure that we develop and that hundreds and hundreds of people in those highly skilled, highly paid jobs are still in employment, which wouldn't be the case if either of those two parties had been making decisions on the future of Scottish industry.
We have a number of supplementaries. I would hope that both the questions and the answers would be listened to respectfully. First of all, Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Judging by some of Daniel Johnson's comments, they probably would rather the yard actually wasn't there and the jobs weren't there either, or the yard's future. There has already been a thorough parliamentary inquiry in the last term of this Parliament, and also now the scrutiny by the Audit Scotland, both of which have generated significant reports and recommendations. Can the Minister set out what the Scottish Government did to contribute to and cooperate with both inquiries, including providing relevant information?
Minister.
Indeed, and as already indicated, the member makes these points very well. The Scottish Government, Transport Scotland, along with CMAL and Ferguson Marine, Port Glasgow, all cooperated fully with Audit Scotland and the Rural Economy and Connectivity Committee inquiry. And this included provision of documentation and provision of a detailed written statement, as well as interviews with key personnel and attendance at REC by both officials and Scottish ministers. And as already indicated, we have also committed to take a review on completion of the two vessels.
Mr Lumsden, if you have a question to ask, press your button and I may call you. Graham Simpson.
Many thanks. This is institutional corruption on a grand scale. Ivan McKee is showing breathtaking arrogance if he thinks there's been any transparency over this. This is the SNP's secret Scotland at its worst. Now, let me quote you another law, the Public Records Scotland Act 2011, which requires the Scottish Government to have a records management plan. And the Act requires the plan to identify the individual responsible for the management of a department's public records. So who was the person in this case? I want the name. And why didn't they ensure that there was a record of the decision-making process?
Minister.
As already indicated, we've been transparent. We have published the documents that are available. We have complied with the inquiries that have taken place. We've committed to undertaking a review and completion of the vessels, as was outlined in the Audit Scotland report. So we are being transparent, we are being open, we are producing the document as available and making sure that's in the public domain. And we have complied with the inquiries that have taken place on this, and we have committed to undertaking a review on completion of the two vessels. But I go back to the point I made earlier. What is at the core of this is the Scottish Government's absolute commitment to supporting Scottish industry, Scottish jobs, and making sure that we continue to do so, whereas the parties opposite clearly are not concerned at all about the people that work in these sites and supporting their employment.
Briefly, Paul McLennan. Point of order, Graham Simpson.
Presiding Officer, what is the point of members coming to this chamber asking straight questions when the Minister completely ignores the question and answers something else? What is the point?
Mr Simpson, I think you will know by this stage that that is not a point of order. The content of ministerial responses is not the responsibility of the presiding officers. Paul McLennan.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. We can all agree that transparency and accountability are key in government. But I don't think the Scottish Government needs lessons in that from any member of the opposition, to be quite frank. But we should not lose sight of why this Government stepped in to save Scotland's last remaining commercial shipyard and the importance of the work it is undertaking. Can the Minister provide an update on progress in this regard?
Minister.
The Yard, I thank you for the question. The Yard has today announced completion of a major milestone in the build of one of the dual-fuel ferries. In a major engineering operation, Hull 802 was fitted with its large bow unit, which at 100 tonnes is the largest single unit added to the ferry's steel hull. This week will also see the final units lifted into place, completing the main hull and steelwork and making way for the installation of the ferry's aluminium superstructure, which is all the units that sit above the main deck. So good progress has been made in progressing the construction of these ferries. And of course, since this Government nationalised Ferguson, it has already delivered 3 smaller vessels. And by nationalising the shipyard, we have kept it open, kept people in work, rescued more than 300 jobs, and since October 2021, Ferguson Marine has consistently employed over 350 staff. There have been 42 apprentices working and learning there since August 2021, and a further 15 will be taken on this summer. The Yard has been in a period of turnaround since 2019, and the past 2 years have been challenging, exacerbated by the pandemic, but what is clear is that progress is being made. 3 smaller vessels delivered, a new CEO appointed is already making a difference in implementing a transformation plan. Hundreds of people and families' income maintained, including lots of independent small businesses as contractors, and 2 new ferries for the islands being built, with a real milestone in their construction being reached today. No wonder the opposition ever want to talk about or welcome this government's industrial strategy and how we're protecting jobs and industry across Scotland.
Brief final supplementary, Katie Clark.
It is clear that there have been multiple failings relating to this contract, and that it's islanders, particularly islanders on Arran this week, who are paying the price. Does the Minister not accept that any review cannot be delayed, and that it must be a full investigation conducted independent of ministers?
Minister.
Well, what I have said is that we're making significant progress on delivery of those vessels, which is what matters to the people on islands. And Calmark engaging on a daily basis with the community on Arran and elsewhere, and the Minister of Transport has joined those calls to ensure that all possible actions are being undertaken with regard to ferry provision. And as I've already said, with regard to the outlined in Audit Scotland report, this Government has committed to a formal review following completions of the vessel project, and that is a commitment we stick to.
Douglas Lumpton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. If the Government are so keen on promoting transparency, will they agree to lift the gagging orders in place at Ferguson Marine?
Minister.
As already made clear, the Scottish Government, Ferguson Marine and Transport Scotland, CMAL, have all cooperated fully with Audit Scotland and the REC Committee inquiry. I've already said they've all fully cooperated with those inquiries. That's the fact of the matter. And as I say again, we've already committed to undertake a full review on completion of the 2 vessels.